Hello and welcome. I am so glad you could join us today. I hope you are having a wonderful day. If it is a character building day, I will make it as awesome as it should be. You are listening to the Motivation Monday Power Hour. I am your host, Motivated Mike. Today's topic is relationships and communication. So why do conflicts occur? Bad communication. That's the number one cause. So how does this happen? Because we have different fundamental underlying beliefs. Each and every one of us have different beliefs that define us, that make us who we are, that define what we do, what we believe should happen. For example, in my apartment, I have a very messy desk. My roommate sees this and he says, "Geez, look at this mess." And of course, I look at the desk and I'm like, well, things are getting done because I don't have time to clean it. It's a sign of productivity, whereas my roommate just sees it as a sign of a mess. If the key beliefs aren't talked about or addressed when it comes to communication, it can become hard. I was watching American Dad the other day, and ironically, an episode that just fit this description perfectly. What happened was the family, they were seeing Roger, for therapy. And Roger was just telling him, hide your secrets, don't share, don't open up. So you know what happened, right? So Klaus, the goldfish, one day just decided to bring everyone together and shared the secrets. And he couldn't get them to listen to him because he was a fish on how to solve their problems and talk about it rationally. And towards the end of the episode, you see Roger the alien, and he steals Klaus's ideas to fix the problems and save the day. Pretty ironic, right? But anyway, we gotta look at these key beliefs that define us and just open up and share what your beliefs are. When was the last time that you sat down with a family member or friend and worked out a problem when one came about? And communication's a pretty interesting topic. Adults with English language know about 35,000 words, and we use about 35,000 of those words daily. Think about that. That's a massive amount of different ways that we can express ourselves. 35,000 words and 5,000 words daily. And when I first heard this, I was kind of blown away by that. And in the world of psychology, there are 3 general communication models, and they each have different goals of communication. The first one is the encoder model, and the goal is accurate communication. You have to talk to someone and make sure your message comes across. There's the intentional speech model, where persuasion takes hold, and the goal is to convince somebody of your ideas that they are valid. There's the perspective talking model, which the goal is to understand the message. When you try and communicate, what is it that you're trying to do? What are you trying to convey? How are you trying to make someone feel? What is your goal? And remember, when I talked about thinking a few weeks back, I said that persuasion is not about facts, but emotion. How does your message make them feel? How do we feel about something instead of how do we think about something? This reminds me of a fun story that I read about. So a man was trying to get a sales job selling, I think it was vacuum cleaners. And so he was practicing his pitch. He was practicing it over and over and over again. He practiced it in front of his friends, in front of his wife. And then he asked his wife if she would buy the product. And you know what she said? "Yes, of course I will buy it, because I love you." Think about the profoundness of that. I mean, sure, we don't buy things with such emotion, but we do buy things with emotion. It's very interesting. So why do we have this language? We have it to free us from time, to share experiences, to create culture. Communication, it's about 7% words, 55% nonverbal, just cues and communication, and 38% voice tone. Think about that one for a second. That's a pretty big statistic. I'll repeat it in case you missed it. Communication is 7% words, 55% nonverbal, and 38% voice tone. And this nonverbal, you're probably asking, why is it 55%? What is it? It includes body language, things like paralanguage, which includes the loudness, the pitch, the speed, how many pauses you take, the breathiness of it, and the spacing. How close are we to the talker? And I'm not talking about spacing as in word spacing. I'm talking about physical spacing. Like, for example, if I hear a teacher say something interesting, you kind of see the audience that's interested in that lean forward ever so slightly to kind of become closer and have their body language show attentiveness. The more interested we are, the more forward we lean. Then when they change the topic again, you see everybody sit back in their seats. And another example of this is that when I give a speech, when I'm talking to somebody, right, and I don't want to be interrupted, what I do is I'd hold eye contact. That is nonverbal communication. I'd clench my hands, nonverbal communication, and often I'd increase my voice, make it louder. That's the voice tone aspect. I mean, the words have very little weight on what communication is, surprisingly. So what are some common body languages that you should watch out for? I'm probably going to do a whole episode on body language in the future. Very interesting topic. For example, how do you know if somebody is lying to you? That's a pretty big one these days. I mean, lie detectors are about 80% accurate. Most people at detecting lies are probably about 55% accurate. Some of the professionals are about 80% accurate as well, give or take a little bit. But somebody who is lying, they have more speech errors. They might blink more. They might change the amount of eye contact that they make. They might make defensive gestures. And this, in some of the text, is more of soothing gestures. So after they lie, they feel uncomfortable, and then they do something to make them feel better. And that's really up to the individual on what they do. You got to watch for it. It's just something that you pick up over time. And another one, if they say something like, "Would I lie to you?" That's usually a pretty good indication that they're lying. It's pretty interesting. They also might shake. They might just freeze up and tense up, and they might just not move. It's another one. But to really tell, you got to establish a baseline behavior before watching what you're trying to get out of them. You got to, for example, you got to just watch and see what they do naturally. And then the changes are what's interesting. It's not about what they do, but it's about the changes that they make. What happens with time? When you bring up this topic, what happens? Got to watch out for it. It's interesting. So anyway, I have a few more examples of body language. Like the signs of confidence, the signs of power. When you have confidence, this one's an interesting one. You tend to spread out a little bit more. Kind of reminds me of the story about the guy that I saw at the airport, and he was buying airline tickets, and they were out of stock. And so he was getting very upset, and you could see him lean over the table. I mean, his back was just like bent forward. He was leaning so much. You can see that sign of confidence and power trying to be displayed, and didn't work out for him. He didn't get the tickets, but it's a funny story. There's also signs of lack of confidence. Kind of reminds me of when my dad was buying a car, and the salesman brought over his manager, and they started talking about things. At first, the sales manager, you could see his body language. He was looking super confident that the salesman was going to sell this car. Then as the conversation went on, you just saw him just get less and less confident. You could just watch it, and it was pretty funny. First, his hands were steepled, and he was smiling, and then slowly kind of went into the prayer position, like, "Oh, please sell this car," and didn't end up buying the car, but that's that's basically where the body language was going. It was pretty funny, though. It was pretty funny. If you watch Cops, you can always tell when people are about to do something dumb, like make a run for it. They always tense up, they become super still. Their hands are clenched usually. They have one foot off the ground just ever so slightly. Sometimes you can't see that one. But anyway, and then you see them run and then the cops chase after them. Pretty funny. But anyway, to establish a behavior baseline, you must watch them before you really dig deep into what their body language means. And after you know this nonverbal communication, you can combine verbal and nonverbal communication for the accurate communication. Are they telling the truth? Are they being deceptive? If their nonverbal and verbal communication lines up, usually that's how you know that they're being honest with you. It's very interesting topic. Read a lot of books on this topic. And you see facial expressions. You'll notice that people generally have 6 facial expressions. They have a happy, they have a sad face, they have a surprise, a fear, an anger, and a disgust. Those are the 6 facial expressions that you can see almost instantly. And you can also see real smiles versus fake smiles. This one's very interesting. A lot of the time you can't even tell why a smile is real and why it's fake. But it's usually, you get tiny wrinkles, tiny little crow's feet right up by your eye when you're really happy about something, genuinely happy. If you watch for it, you can see if it's a genuine happiness or it's kind of a fake, artificial happiness. I know that when you watch the debate, you see Hillary Clinton. A lot of people see her smile and they're like, that's not a real smile. What is this? She looks kind of robotic and cold and distant. And I don't know. That's just what I've been hearing people say. Very interesting, though. Another thing that people ask me about is we go to this engineering school. They ask, how can we get others to open up? How can we get them to share their experiences about themselves? How do we get them to just talk more? I mean, a lot of people at this school are very quiet, and in this world, there's a lot of people that are very quiet. So I'm going to give you some tips on that. All right? Don't steal my tips and use them against me. But here's the number one phrase. Number one phrases. You can say, they'll tell you their problems, and maybe they talk about, oh, I'm having trouble at school, and I don't know what to do. Then you can follow it up with something like, it seems like you're trying really hard. You just take a guess. You take a guess at what is wrong. And 2 things can happen. They will explain why you are wrong, or they will say exactly and keep elaborating on the problem. There's the 2 options there. You can say, it seems like, or you could say, it sounds like, or something to that effect. You kind of get the idea. Now, what I don't want you to do is say, I think that, and then just start with I. If you start with I, it makes you the subject of the sentence. It's much less effective as compared to if you say, it seems like. I mean, you'd be surprised at how much this works, how much people will open up with a statement. And then you could just follow it up with a second one or a third one. And another way, if they say something, just repeat the last 3 letters or the main idea of the sentence. If they say, oh, it is a tremendous day, and you'd be like, yeah, tremendous day, and they'll keep going without even realizing it. Subconsciously, they'll keep going and adding information to the topic. Very interesting. If you're listening, I challenge you to try that with somebody. You'll just be blown away at how effective it is. Very interesting, though. And another thing that people often want to know, how do I get out of things that I don't want to do? If somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you should come to this party, for example, how do you get out of it? I'm going to let you in on a secret here. Now, if I tell you, hey, you should come to my party, you shouldn't be like, oh, and then just throw my psychology back at me. I will call you out on that. So how do you get out of things that you don't want to do? Now, when somebody says, hey, do you want to come to this party? You know what I say? I say, I don't do that. Now, what can they say in response? Normally, when you come up with something and they say something, they're just like, oh, you should go because, and they give you some elaborate reason that just makes your excuse invalid. But when you just leave it open-ended like that, I don't do that, then what are they going to do? There's nowhere to go, and then it just drops off. That's what happens every time. And you look at some people that will say, but why not? Here's their second magic phrase. Ready for this one? Because it doesn't interest me. If you use those two, you can get out of almost anything. It's very fun, very fun. Hey, do you want to go hear classical music? No, it just doesn't interest me. Now, there can be thousands of reasons why something doesn't interest you. They can't argue it. It's magical. It's amazing. My co-producer here is kind of laughing at that because he knows how true that is. He's going to go out and some of his friends are going to be like, hey, do you want to go to the study group later? And he'll be like, it doesn't interest me. I don't do that. But now there you have it, folks. You have the two lines that'll get you out of just about anything when somebody asks you to do something. It'll be great. Just don't use it on my events, Do you want to listen to the Motivated Mike Show? I don't do that. I'll call you up and find you. Anyway, moving on. So others have a very big impact on what we do and how we think. We don't even realize this. We do things to be similar to people. We do things to be less similar to people. We have to be optimally different. Think about that for a minute. You have to be optimally different. For example, if everyone at Mines wore the same general t-shirt, the same general type of pants, you would wear the same general type of t-shirt and pants. That would be in fashion. But you can't wear the exact same thing as someone else because it's just weird. You have to be optimally different. You have to be similar but different. Call that the Goldilocks effect in psychology. Very interesting topic. How you have to be, in the Three Little Bears, the Goldilocks effect, where the first soup was too cold, the second one was too hot, and the other one was in the middle, just right. It's all about that middle path. I'll give you another example. Like people that are in the kind of gothic scene. They all wear black, but not the same outfit. If they all wore the same outfit, I'm sure you wouldn't see it for very long. It gets uncomfortable, it gets awkward. Very interesting. But other people, we pick up their habits. We do what they do. And other people also have an interesting effect on us. I'll give you an example of this. If you go to the gym on a busy day, on a really crowded day, there's lots and lots of people, what do you see? You see yourself working out harder, don't you? You see yourself working out more intensively than if there was nobody in the gym. Very interesting thoughts. And it's proven, too. Simple tasks always improve with the amount of people. But if you have more people and you have a hard task that involves lots of thinking, then you do it worse. If it's a habit where it doesn't take any thinking, people do it amazingly well in front of other people. They're on average faster, they do it stronger, better. But if it requires that system 2 thinking that I was talking about in my thinking episode a few weeks ago, they require a lot more focus, a lot less distractions to be successful. And other people, they also influence us when they share their ideas and insights. Reading a book on that now, and the main premise of it is the idea that what we say affects how others feel, and then how they feel affects what they do. Very, very interesting. But if we're around negative people all day, if we're around people that don't inspire us to grow, it's a very toxic environment for us. We may not even realize it, but it happens. Our habits are based on who's around us. Now imagine, I'm going to give you an analogy here. This one's pretty crazy. I heard it from Zig Ziglar. Imagine if a man just came up to our house, right, and just took a trash can and just dumped garbage absolutely everywhere. You'd be pissed, wouldn't you? You'd be absolutely furious. You'd be like, oh, you better clean that up right now. Imagine if that happened to you. You'd probably go up to somebody and probably tell their friends. Some crazy, can't say that on radio, some crazy guy just came up and just dumped all his trash in my living room. I wish I shot him. In fact, I should have. You know, you'd probably tell that person to do more than clean that up right now. You'd probably massacre them. But this analogy, we let people dump garbage ideas in our mind. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever stop to think about that? And we just let them. We just let them. It's crazy. I mean, birds of a feather flock together. You gotta associate with winners. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that say, oh, if you're gonna talk about relationships and communication, why don't you ever talk about love? I want to know about love. Tell me about love, Michael. All right, I'll tell you about relationships in that context. Kind of reminds me of the story of of the Symposium by Plato. It's the story that men and women were once one person with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 heads, and the gods split them into 2 because they were too strong. What an inspiring story. What an interesting tale. Now, if you ask your parents how they fell in love, it won't be that kind of story, right? It won't be that crazy. But it will still be a romantic story. Pretty different comparisons than what we have today in the world of online dating, the world of Tinder, things like that. It seems that the world has become flakier, less likely to take chances because there's so many options. A real paradox of choice, so to speak. It's very interesting, very interesting. And it kind of defines where we are in our current state. I mean, it's just how it works. But we lose something in this process. We lose that initial personal connection. We like what is familiar. We lose the shared activities, the positive feedback that is only found in real life, meeting people in real life. All of that goes out the window. And now we don't see people as unique. It reminds me of a study that I read, and it went like this, that people who go to class are more attractive. You hear that, all my listeners? People who go to class are more attractive. So what's the premise of this study? If I go to class every day, will the general population find me more attractive? Well, not really. It's the people in the class itself that will find me more attractive, just because they're familiar with me. Familiarity brings liking, and liking eventually may lead to love. Just how it works. And a lot of people, they really don't have a good grasp on what it means to love. It's a very abstract concept. Now, it kind of goes something like this. It's only when you are in love with someone that you see who they really are. There's a quote from Les Miserables where it says, "When you look into the face of the one you love, you see the face of God." Just think of the profoundness of that. I got to tell you it's profound because otherwise you might miss it. When you look into the face of the one you love, you see the face of God. When you are not in love, we only see a fragmented version of them instead of a divine being. We build up these promises and expectations when we're in love. We'll likely never come through with from a level of deep feeling. And let me warn you, falling in love, it isn't rising into love. It requires trust. It's giving yourself up. You might be broken by this. It happens. I mean, it's possible. That's life. That's what it is. But when it comes to falling in love, there's one person who I really follow on this, the psychologist, Dr. Gary Smalling. He gave us several tips to work with here. Women know a good relationship. Men generally do not. That's the first tip. And the second one. A good relation has security and loyalty, communication and romance. Now, that one's pretty obvious, I know. And here's another one. This one is really the dividing factor between men and women, in my opinion. Women, they speak as a way of thinking. They talk to reduce stress. Now men, they do the opposite. They think, and then they speak generally. They talk. Talking about problems increases stress. And lastly, men should not try and solve women's problems. I know that's kind of how we're wired. We look at it and we say, oh, you're having this problem? Why don't you just do this? No, you're not supposed to do that. You're going to cause all this drama. You just gotta gently say, I see, and then just kind of wait and let them come up with a solution on their own. As they're talking, they're reducing that stress that they have, and that's very healthy to reduce the stress. You just gotta realize that's generally some things that Dr. Gary Smalling has given us to work with. But how do we tell if a breakup is imminent? We see that the voice decreases, the negativity increases, and the loyalty decreases. If you follow those three things, you can pretty much see when a relationship is going to go south. I'll repeat them again just so you can write them down. The voice decreases, and the negativity increases, and the loyalty decreases. Neglect also increases. It all happens. But if you just watch for it, just establish a baseline while the relationship is healthy, you can tell when things are going to go south. Now, we have a new topic. What about communication in groups? What is the basics of group dynamics? I know a lot of us have taken Epics 1 and Epics 2, where it's this class that's focused around group projects. You always have that one team member who isn't pulling their weight, and you're like, come on, work here, get something done, right? You've all had somebody in a group at one point in time where they just weren't pulling their weight. But there are several group roles that are important when it comes to group work. Every group, they have an initiator, somebody who starts the process, somebody who gets everything going, who sets it into action. There's an information seeker, somebody who seeks out more information to solve the problem. There's an information giver, somebody who gives out more information. And of course, there's an opinion seeker. They want to know how everyone else feels about whatever you're proposing. And of course, there's a giver who says, yeah, that's a good idea. And there's the elaborator. So once you establish an idea, they kind of fill in the details, kind of fill it in, make it a full idea. There's the coordinator, the one who says, oh, how about you do this, I'll do this, and you can do this, and we'll come back next week and then see what we have. There's the energizer, the one that think of the Energizer Bunny, kind of gets the group excited, gets them passionate about the project, gets it all going. And then there's the recorder, the one who writes it down. That's a very important step, because if you don't write it down, you're just left with nothing, or just a time wasted. That's it. Now keep in mind, one person can play multiple roles, and multiple roles might be played by multiple people. Every group is different. But if you don't have all of these different roles in a group, you generally see just lack of communication. You see the group falling apart. It's really important to have every one of these things represented at least once in the group. But I will warn you that you can't have irrational thinking. Groups must have a blocker. And what I mean by that is someone willing to create waves that are needed. I mean, if you just come up with the idea, keep going with the idea, and nobody speaks up, you're never going to know if it's a bad idea. Somebody's got to speak up and say, hey, wait a second. And it doesn't matter if that one person who speaks up is right or not. What matters is that they do speak up. If they do speak up, you're more likely to see a second person speak up, even if they disagree. Maybe they're speaking up for a different reason. But that person would have otherwise been silent. So pretty big, important topic to think about. And this person who disagrees, they're just trying to help the group. Don't punish them for speaking up and being like, wait a sec, is this really a good idea? I mean, that's a valid question. I mean, it's just how it works. But groups have to have this blocker. I mean, what you don't want to happen is to say, does anyone else have a better idea? And then silence. And then you just go along with the original idea, even though it's less than optimal. I mean, probably a good example of a blocker in real life was Justice Scalia before he died. He'd always give these controversial opinions, very controversial, but he'd always speak up and create these blocks that made the group stop and think about it for a little bit. I mean, was he right all the time? Well, no, none of us are right all the time. But Justice Scalia, before he died, he made a great blocker. But very controversial ideas. But the fact that he allowed himself to speak with these ideas, it's a pretty noteworthy thing. I respect it a lot. And of course, in a group, maintenance is good as well. We need people to encourage and harmonize the group, to summarize and keep us on track. But we do have some problems within a group that could potentially occur without us even realizing it. We can keep others out of the group or in the group with the group bias. That's the kind of idea that all the Republicans will vote for a Republican president and all the Democrats will vote for a Democratic president. That kind of idea, it's interesting. But we will discriminate based off who is in the group and who is not. And that's just human nature. We can't really change it. We just have to be aware of it. And if we see it happening, just be like, whoa, wait a sec. I think we're being irrational here. Just point it out. There's also cognitive dissonance. It takes place in individuals, but it also takes place in groups. It's the idea that even though we're wrong, we're going to ignore the facts and keep going on our wrong way just because we feel like we should. And it happens just as easily in groups as it does individuals. It's amazing. There's also a group polarization. If I say something extreme, will anyone block me? Sometimes not. And that's what causes this group polarization. You get more extreme viewpoints, more crazy ideas. And this is especially true in smaller groups. The smaller group you have, the less outside perspectives you get. The more likely that your ideas are going to be extreme. Not always, though, but generally. Big issue, though. Big issue. Another issue is de-individualization. We just kind of lose our own personality in the process. We just kind of give up our personal norms to fit in with the group. How many people do you know that have joined a group and then they just changed over time? They change their fundamental beliefs just to be a part of that group. It's very interesting. It sometimes does happen. Just how it works. And I'm going to give you another tip about communication. do not argue. I'll tell you what I mean by this. You're probably like, but Mike, you're just telling me just to accept what everyone else says? No, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm just saying, do not argue. There's an easier way to get to a solution that doesn't create tension. And if you have a lot of tension, release that tension by telling a joke, just lightening up the atmosphere. And don't debate people if it's unneeded. Now here's what you do. You convince them by allowing them to come to their own conclusion. You're probably thinking, Mike, what do you mean by that? That doesn't make any sense. So here's what you will say. Listen up, this is important. So you will say, I might be wrong. I am wrong often. Can you explain why you think this? And then just let them explain their logic. And after they talk about it, after they tell you all the details, one of two things will happen. It'll either make sense and be rational, or they'll look at it and be like, you're right, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then we'll be open to a new idea, new suggestion. It's how it works in sales as well. When you try and sell somebody a product, if they say, well, I don't like it because of this feature, and I'm sure there's a lot of salesmen who just look at them and say, what? You're an idiot, you don't know anything, and then just not get the sale. But if they say, oh yeah, the product, why don't you think the product is up to specification? And then they'll explain their thinking and tell them a little bit, and maybe they don't understand the product really well. And that's when you come in and say, really? But I thought this is what was true. And eventually they'll be like, well, I guess I'm really not that aware of this. And slowly we'll get to a conclusion very peacefully and much more smoothly than you would if you're just trying to insist that someone is wrong. Have you ever tried to convince somebody that they were wrong? It's impossible. It's tough to do. Even you could have all the facts in the world, but we're not convinced with facts. We're not interested in facts. We don't want facts. We want emotion. We are emotional beings. We like to feel that we are right. And by just kind of explaining it, can help people come to the conclusion that it was their idea all along. And that's a very empowering feeling instead of a destructive feeling. It's all about how we make others feel. And I probably say it every single time. The effect that we have on other people is probably the biggest impact that we will have in life. It's a very important concept. The book of the week that I'm going to recommend. This book I just finished. It's an incredible book. It's called Invisible Influence. And it's by Jonah Berger. And everybody's reading it. But it's talking about the hidden forces that shape our behavior. So, of course, we have the first chapter that explains monkey see, monkey do. Why we trust each other, even when they are wrong. And you won't believe how often we trust other people. But it talks all about these dynamics. And it talks about why we do things that are different from one another. Very, very interesting. And probably one of the most interesting one was, why are kids completely unique from parents most of the time? And just went into detail about that. It talked about other social influences, and being optimally different was a pretty big idea, and how we can use others to motivate ourselves. That's probably one of the ones that I took most note of. We can encourage people to work harder just by being around others when the task is simple, or working alone when the task requires thinking. We can put this social influence to work. And this book, it really does a great job of explaining that. It's called Invisible Influence. I hope you pick up a copy of your library and give it a read. And now I'd like to share some notes or some news of the week. So my first story here, this one's a pretty inspiring one. So students donated class trip money to a boy who lost his mother to cancer. And this money, they usually go on a trip every single year. It's about $8,500 that they gave up. They gave up this awesome, fun trip to Boston just to give it to this boy who lost his mother to cancer. Very inspiring story. If kids are the future, we are in good hands. Do you have any thoughts on that?
If those kids are the future, we're in good hands.
That's very true. There's a lot of kids who...
But there's a lot of kids out there.
You know, I mean, when you're in grade school, you look around and you're like, wow, we have really dumb kids. And then if you think about it, they go off to be dumb adults. Very interesting, though. Very interesting. Oh, and also, if anyone would like to call in today, maybe add their input on the topic of the day, the phone number is 303-273-3304. I repeat, the number is 303-273-3304. And anyway, my next story of the week, this one's hilarious. A Buffalo woman sues to stop the presidential election. You're probably thinking, did she succeed? Do I have to not go out and vote tomorrow? No, she didn't succeed, folks.
What a surprise.
Her excuse was, I was waiting for an okay from God.
Interesting.
I don't know. That's always an interesting topic when people say, "Oh, I'm waiting for God to make the move." It's like, well,
Indeed.
I think God created you, and you were the one who's supposed to make the move. That's what He created. That was kind of the message that I got from the whole religion, is that you got to take control of your life and be empowered to do things. Very funny though. So I don't know. We'll see if God ever gives a sign to this Buffalo woman, and let's see what happens. I don't know. My next story of the week. This one's a funny one. This one you're gonna find very entertaining.
Oh, good.
A thief breaks into a car only to steal a Kit Kat bar at Kansas State University.
He must have been really craving that Kit Kat bar.
We even left an apology note. Says he was very hungry. I know, think of the irony there. I'm very hungry, so I'm going to steal this Kit Kat bar. I mean, how much more bizarre can you get? But this is where it gets even funnier.
Oh,
right?
good.
So there was a follow-up story a few days ago. The Hershey's Chocolate Company, they heard about this story, and they filled his car with thousands of Kit Kats after they heard the story. They had this picture of him with all these Kit Kats surrounded him, and it's like, geez.
The guy who stole from the car, or the guy whose car got broken into?
The guy whose car got broken into. They don't know who stole
Nice.
the Kit Kat bar originally.
So what
I don't
if
know.
somebody comes up to his car and steals all those Kit Kats out?
That's a lot of Kit Kats to steal. I don't know if
It would be quite the feat.
I don't know if that would happen. I think at that point he'd just give him a Kit Kat bar, just... I mean, what's he going to do with thousands of Kit Kat?
I have no idea.
We're after Halloween right now. You can't even get trick-or-treaters right now. There's a joke about college students living in their car, if you missed it. And lastly, this one's a great story as well. Jill Stein urges voters not to, quote, throw away their votes.
So she's asking to not be voted for? Is that what I'm hearing?
I didn't quite understand the true concept of what she was saying. I just heard that quote and I was like, the irony is strong right there.
Indeed.
It's like, well, if everybody believed it, then she'd have a chance. But we
Right.
have this kind of in-group bias and out-group bias that kind of plays a part there. Makes things very interesting. I have a joke that I was told the other day, and was that this election seems more like jury duty than actually voting. It's because of all the rumors and all the corruption going on and everything else. I don't know, it's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. I'll let you decide who to vote for. But take it from Jill Stein. Don't throw away your vote. Very interesting, though. I know on minds that people, not a huge fan of Jill Stein because of her energy policies. She's not a huge fan of nuclear energy, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of the nuclear engineering department in general, believe it or not. And very interesting, though. Very interesting. And that's all that I have for today. So, I hope you tune in next week. The next show is on Monday at 4. And the topic will be, the topic will be persistence. It's one of the things that Motivated Mike is most known for is persistence. You know, I may not do a perfect job the first time, but I'm always persistent and keep going at it, keep working at it. And with time, it's amazing what I can achieve. It really is. Persistence. Persistence will be the topic. If you missed any episode or would like to hear them again, you can find them on YouTube. The channel name is Motivated Mike. Been working hard to get these episodes uploaded. Usually it takes me about 2 weeks, but it's fine though. It's fine. I get them up eventually. Stay wise, my friends. Motivated Mike, out.